Chase Young has had a pretty interesting career with the Washington Commanders so far, and maybe could be on the move. We talk about if the Ravens could potentially be a good fit for him, and a lot more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in here to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we are here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in with us, making us your first listen every day, free and available always, all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. And here back with us after a little bit of a break, but he's back now on Taco Thursday, is Spencer Schultz of Exit 52. And Spencer, I know that we're so close to training camp for the Ravens, just a couple of weeks away here. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of pent-up excitement. I'm ready to get all that out, and I know for Baltimore, they're ready to get back on the field and hopefully win some games this year.
Definitely. I think that this Ravens team feels like they're in a pretty good spot. They're excited about Todd Monken taking over the reins as offensive coordinator. They're excited that they have Lamar Jackson locked up long-term and that dark cloud's not hanging over their head. Odell Beckham Jr. coming in provides some name brand value. Zay Flowers, an exciting young receiver, and a couple guys that are more desired to earn second contracts. Rashad Bateman, J.K. Dobbins, Patrick Queen, guys that are chomping at the bit. Justin Madubuike, looking for their big payday coming up here soon. Ravens don't pick up Queen's fifth year. Rashad Bateman's still up in the air, looking to have a healthy season, to get one under his belt in his third season, obviously marred by injury in the first two. And Justin Madubuike looking to break through and have that high impact, especially as a pass rusher season, where he feels like he can probably earn himself a $50, $60 million contract if he is to have a big year. So a lot of guys jumping at the bit to come back from injury or prove themselves or get a big payday. And I think John Harbaugh and the Ravens coaching staff looking to prove that they are still the class of the AFC, that they deserve to be mentioned as a top three AFC contender, as they have been for much of John Harbaugh's tenure, and that they've made the right moves. They've been able to maneuver from the Joe Flacco era to the Lamar Jackson era into Lamar Jackson's second contract successfully, and that with injuries behind them from 2 and 3 years ago, guys like Ronnie Stanley, who has described himself as finally feeling healthy going into an offseason for the first time since 2019, able to get ready, get going, and go hit the ground running.
Yeah, and this is a big prove-it year for a lot of those guys. I agree with you, and especially for players who were trying to earn those second contracts, as you said. But I know, Spencer, the Ravens not necessarily done, potentially adding to their roster. Maybe a corner comes in, maybe an edge rusher. But there was a proposed trade on Bleacher Report. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but Chase Young, who has had, I'd say, a pretty interesting career with the Commanders so far, I think hasn't lived up to a ton of expectations. Obviously, a couple of injuries along the way as well. It was him for Patrick Queen in the 4th round pick. And I know there were two sides to it. Some people were like, yes, sign me up. Other people were like, no, what are you talking about? I mean, where were you on that deal? If it was Chase Young for Patrick Queen in the 4th, would you be happy with that deal or would you not be?
Personally, I'm a huge fan of Patrick Queen's game. I was huge on him. I'm a little biased when it comes to Patrick Queen's side. I love the impact he had. I love the impact him and Roquan Smith have. But Chase Young is a super dynamic player. And a year removed from injury, from everything I've read, is not enough. You need 18 months to get over an ACL, a major knee injury. Chase Young was a high-impact player as a rookie, and hasn't been able to get that clean bill of health, as we were just mentioning, talking about some Ravens. So, ultimately, edge is probably a higher impact position. The Ravens, I'm sure, would love to have Chase Young come in and feel like he could potentially elevate their defense in certain ways that would help them go further. I mean, pass rush, for my money, really can win you a Super Bowl. If you can get pressure with 4, you can beat any team. If you can consistently generate pressure with 4, it opens up the door for your offense to have an okay day and be able to win, especially in the playoffs. So Chase Young, I think most really anyone would probably make that trade. With that said, I do love Patrick Queen's impact in this defense, his ability to play beside Roquan Smith. I think that many people would probably dismiss Queen super quickly in that scenario, but I'm not going to use this scenario to bash Queen, but I think that Young would be probably a higher impact, and fourth-round picks can be fine, but I really have been of the attitude that day 3 picks really don't matter that much. That's not what wins and loses you games and Super Bowls and playoff games. Hitting on one's great, but day 3 picks, less than 15% of day 3 picks become high impact starters by the end of their rookie or become consistent starters, I should say, by the end of their rookie contract. So really a crapshoot there, roll the dice, and Chase Young has the ability, like I said, to help maybe generate more ability with 4 to go really frustrate an offense and leave more defenders in coverage. And while Queen has many redeeming qualities, I'm sure Eric DeCosta would probably make that trade if presented the opportunity, but I don't think that will come to fruition.
Yeah, and I know that there's been a lot of speculation about will Chase Young be moved or not, but it seems like you're on board with, him if he were made available and the Ravens were to make the move. You would be okay with him coming in. You kind of mentioned it a little bit there, but in a more in-depth perspective, how do you think he'd fit in with the Ravens if by somehow he was acquired by the team?
Well, I think he's an explosive in the Ravens system. He's an explosive kind of rush outside linebacker, and in their 4-man fronts on passing downs, able to go play on the strong side. He's extremely explosive, a twitched up athlete. That's why he went first overall. He showed enough as a rookie for me to know that he's capable of making a super high impact. And because of his injuries, played, I guess, a few games last year. What did he play? Like week 16 through 18, something like that. I think he played like 120, 130 snaps overall. I don't think he had a sack, but just wasn't able to kind of recapture that magic in 2021. And then obviously last year, injuries marred him along the way. So I think there's still some development to be done. If Anthony Weaver got someone like him to work with, and Chuck Smith, someone like him to work with, he has such a smorgasbord of explosive ability, such a wide variety of ways that you can deploy his explosive hands and his get off, that it would be a really fun toy to have for the Ravens. I think he could be a high impact run defender for sure. We've seen that across his first 2-ish healthy seasons. I think in 2021, he was healthy for maybe the first 8 to 10 weeks of the year. I think he only had a couple sacks, but I know that he had some really high impact games against the Bills, if I recall correctly, as a pass rusher. I remember some highlights against New Orleans and gave the Chiefs a little bit of some frustration. Only ended up playing maybe 400 or 500 snaps, but someone that can really shock in the run game, and then just has that kind of beyond. He kind of reminds me of Matthew Judon in some ways, a pass rusher. Like he can just go get out and figure it out, shock with the hands and then go hunt down. His name's Chase Young. He'll chase those young quarterbacks down. So to me, a player that is an immediate high impact contributor against the run, I think that goes vastly overlooked. But if you hear Anthony Weaver or Mike McDonald or anyone talk, you have to earn the right to rush the passer, very much so as a younger player. And Chase Young will do that super quickly. So his ability to shock, stack, present eyes, and then shed and go make a play is awesome. He's an awesome run defender. While he could still use a little bit of tinkering, a little bit more of a developed plan as a pass rusher, he still will be able to go make plays for you. And I think kind of, is kind of like that. What you want an Odafia way to play like, he already is capable of doing so in many ways. So I think that he would fit in perfectly with what the Ravens need. You go look at an Aiden Hutchinson in Mike McDonald's defense at Michigan. I think that's the kind of impact you're seeing. Someone that's super explosive, that's going to hustle through plays. I think that he got a bad reputation at times for maybe slowing up on the backside in 2021 a little bit in some plays. But when you really go look at the tape, if he can make a play, he'll go make a play. He loves football, and someone that's obviously desperate to go make a name for himself and go get another second contract, like as we mentioned previously. So I think Chase Young's a high impact player, was not healthy enough to go be a super high impact player in his limited action in 2022, but should have a healthy offseason now somewhat, and could see him catch on in the second half of this year. I think that it would be a little silly for Washington to move on from him, considering what their strength of their team is supposed to be, their front seven with Montez Sweat and with Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. I don't know that especially getting a Patrick Queen back in that scenario is going to, help turn make a strength in another position necessarily, but ultimately is just an explosive, highly capable edge rusher, run defender on the edge setter, all of those things. So I think that we've yet to see the best of Chase Young, and we might this season.
Yeah, and I'd be all on board if Chase Young were to be made available. I think he stays in Washington, but if he is and the Ravens make a move for him, I say come on down. You mentioned it. Chase Young can come chase those quarterbacks with the Ravens. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll put a bow on the Ravens pass rush a little bit and also talk about expectations for Patrick Queen. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And I'm a big fantasy guy, and I'm really excited that our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best daily fantasy picks each week, all season long. So whether you're prepping for a draft or even just scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to be providing you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And today, Justin Jefferson, one of my favorite receivers in the NFL, a guy who I'm in dynasty leagues, but I have never done a full dynasty draft. It's just been I've joined and we've done rookie drafts. I've never had Justin Jefferson, but I would do anything to get him on my teams. When you're on the clock for your first overall pick in the 2023 fantasy drafts, it's okay to get downright giddy about doing the gritty. That means picking Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, and that is a guaranteed fit. Over the past 2 seasons, Jefferson has been, incredible. He's led the league in both receptions and receiving yards. He's going to remain a dominant number 1 receiver and a target monster for the very, very foreseeable future. Jefferson is guaranteed to fit to ignite the rest of your fantasy football lineup towards winning success. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. They have air filters, brakes, batteries, anything, tail lights, alternators, shock struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the right parts and accessories to fit your vehicles, look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We are back. Our second segment, Kevin Oestreicher still rocking with Spencer Schultz here. And Spencer, I know with the pass rush, there's been a lot made about it. Obviously, they lose Justin Houston. They lose Calais Campbell. Jason Pierre-Paul is gone. I believe the number, they've lost 18 sacks from last year's team. And they haven't necessarily added, names from the outside. They drafted Tavius Robinson, but it's going to be a lot of, I think, internal growth for them, especially at this point right now. So how are you feeling? What are your speaking of expectations, what if they don't add anybody else, if this is the roster they're working with for the season, what are your expectations for how good the pass rush can be, or are you a little concerned?
I think that the Ravens, again, like to manufacture pass rush. I think that they're not super concerned with having, and they did finish, I think, 5th in sacks last year. I think they had 48 sacks, somewhere around there. So, while the pressure might not have been as consistent as some want, they like to use Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith. They like to be able to manufacture rush from anywhere on the football field. Mike McDonald took a lot of philosophy from Dave Aranda and from Wink Martindale. A little bit more on the Aranda side of what we see today, maybe. But again, it's simulating pressure. It's overloading one side. It's getting a quarterback to hold the ball, confused by who's dropping off the line of scrimmage at times, and then therefore holding the football, getting a 3-on-3 or a 3-on-2 on one side, and having someone on the other side just to space out 2 blockers and get a lot of pressure that way. So I think that we're going to see a group effort to do so. The Ravens, like we just talked about last segment, they like to stop the run first. They like to be able to build the wall first, then rush through the passer that way. They're very fundamentally sound in terms of stacking and getting eyes up first. In passing downs, known passing downs, I think they do a nice job getting after it a little bit. Dafe Owe was super disappointing. We heard Chuck Smith say when he took media availability, the Ravens' new outside linebackers coach, that you will know Odafe Owe's signature move after the season. And I've been shouting from the rooftops that I think Owe, because he ran a 4.37, has been miscast as a speed rusher. He's too tall. You don't see, there's a little bit here and there, maybe in Aldon Smith a few years ago. You'll see some tall, long pass rushers be able to be a speed rusher, but their center of gravity is too high to be able to get under a tackle too often. It requires extra work, as opposed to a Justin Houston, or as opposed to a Dwight Freeney, or some of the shorter guys with a lower center of gravity. Odafe Owe is a strong dude. I think he should be playing through a long arm bull rush. Whenever he has had productive games as a pass rusher, he's done really well against Jack Conklin of the Browns right tackle. For whatever reason, the game plan is go rush through his chest. Use your length to bull rush. It can set up the inside track and the outside track as a rusher. And I really am of the general position that that should be most guys' go-to move, the long arm bull rush. It uses length. It forces the tackles to get into a little bit of a fight or flight mode, and then you can set them up to swat their hands, to swipe, to rip, to shoot inside, all of those things. So I think Owe needs to be more of a power rusher. He rushed really well from inside alignments where he could use a little bit more of his suddenness on guards too. So I'm curious to see how Owe's progression continues. I think he was super disappointing at the beginning of last year. They talked about how he wanted to be able to be used in coverage more, and how he lost weight. He was playing faster. He had the shoulder injury. He got super light. I think that was a mistake. I think getting him stronger, not faster. He has plenty of natural speed. He is a 4.3 guy, but he's 6'5", 6'6", and should be able to play through a tackle, push the pocket in, and then use his length to go chase and go recover in space and go chase guys down. David Ojabo, I mean, could be a breakout star very easily. That's why the Ravens drafted him so highly, considering he was going to miss 1 of 4 years as a rookie on a valuable, potential rookie contract. All the reports coming out have been awesome. At this point, we only take success in camp, especially at that position, so much as you can throw it. With Baltimore Ravens, every year there's spectacular headlines, Owe or Judon or someone, and they just haven't really had that top shelf year from a pass rusher. I think that interior-wise, Michael Pierce showed some really nice flashes before he unfortunately was lost for the season last season due to his biceps injury. But him, Travis Jones, Justin Madubuike, they bring back Brent Urban, Broderick Washington. None of those guys are going to make a top 15 list on ESPN's, top defensive tackles. But I think all of those guys can have individual wins, individual moments. I talked about Justin Madubuike in the first segment. Just over rushes. He doesn't seem to get his eyes up. He seems to want to win the rep against the block, but it isn't winning to the quarterback. It's winning the block. So I'd like to see him delay his rush a little bit more, try and have a little bit more wherewithal about how to position himself to go actually hit the quarterback. I think he's capable of beating box fight right now, but has just never been a guy that has that somewhat natural feeling. I hate, especially in scouting, the word instinct, but I think that instinct does somewhat apply in terms of where you rush to get to the quarterback. So would like to see him be a little bit maybe slower in his approach, a little more aware of how he can go get a hit as opposed to go beat a block. And sometimes you get hits through blocks or while blocked. So would like to see him contain a little bit more off the blocks, not take himself out of plays, over rush, get washed out. It's difficult because he is a lighter guy, but he does have length. He has plenty of strength. I don't think his weight is an issue really the way he plays, but he needs to figure out a way to be a little bit more around the quarterback as opposed to beating blocks. And then, the rest of the group, Tyus Bowser was looking like before his Achilles injury. I mean, he could have maybe been a 10-sack guy, something like that. Could have been that, maybe good, not great pass rusher to replace Judon's production, things of that nature. In that sense, I think that sacks are an overrated stat. A lot of sacks are quarterback caused, but Bowser, I think, has a nice bag. A lot of it does come from, guess what, the long arm bull rush. I think he has a nice bag and is a productive player. So whether the Ravens make an addition, I think that, if Justin Houston is going to play football, it feels like it's going to be in Baltimore again. He's spoken so highly of Baltimore. He let the Ravens use a really uniquely, rarely used tag on him last year that assured that if he didn't sign with another team by a certain date, he could only sign with the Ravens. They didn't use that this year, which might tell you something that maybe he doesn't want to, you know, can get it either way. But I think that is a nice addition. If they don't bring back Justin Houston, I think we see Eric DaCosta, who loves to discount shop at the trade deadline, does go make a move for a pass rusher. I think that you can go bring in a pass rusher of any position really on the entire football field, that you can find someone who can come in without spending much time with a team or in a system and go make a difference. I would say probably edge rusher might be number one, where you can stick somebody on an island and go say, get after the quarterback on third down. I think that translates systems, schemes, things of that nature. Probably linebacker inside linebacker might be number two. So if they don't go bring in a Houston, I think we do see the Ravens get active at the trade deadline. Especially if they don't get production out of OA again, and they don't get David Ajabo into a place where they feel like he could be a 3-down player, 4-down player. Pass rush, was good enough last year, but they want better than good enough. They're going to want to be able to, again, hopefully get to a point where they can rush 4 and win because of the way they rush 4. It opens up so much when you don't have to bring a 5th defender. Mike McDonald did turn down the amount of 5 and 6 man rushes a little bit, but I think they would like to turn it down even more if they could. I think any defensive coordinator, if you feel comfortable enough rushing 4, you feel like you're in the best position to win. So whether we see that or not without an addition, let's see.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we saw earlier in the offseason at FAOA work, there were some videos of him working on the long arm bull rush. I can't remember with who or what it was, but it was earlier on and we saw it. So hopefully he'll be able to utilize that much better this year. But we'll talk about Patrick Queen in the final segment. Coming up, we'll talk about him, expectations, and some sneaky roster fit. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to dive into still on Locked On Ravens. We'll be right back. We're back, rounding out Locked On Ravens with Spencer Schultz. I am still Kevin Ostreicher as we dive into, let's talk about the Patrick Queen portion now, Spencer. You said in the first segment you are a Patrick Queen guy. You're biased toward Patrick Queen. So I want to kind of give you the floor here because you've been in on him since day one, essentially. You like his potential. You've liked the growth, obviously. I know it was a bit of a rough start. I'd say an up and down start. The Ravens 2020 draft class, they didn't have like rookie mini camp or, a lot of in-person time with those coaches. And I think that impacted a lot of players, not just Queen, but a lot of players in that draft class. But with Roquan Smith now in the fold, to be fair, he was playing still good football without him last year, but Roquan Smith elevated everybody. What are your expectations for him this year? Contract year, a motivated Patrick Queen. Are you expecting a big year that results in a big contract for him?
I am expecting him to have a big year, and I would say he at least gets a pretty decent contract somewhere, whether it's Baltimore or not. I did get the chance to interview Patrick Queen before last offseason one-on-one, and I asked him that very question. I felt like the COVID impact on training camp and rookie camp was substantial and makes it really difficult as someone who was not a 3-year starter at LSU, was not a 2-year starter at LSU, was a 2/3 of a season starter, and has spoken about, seeing a lot more 3-man route concepts and some of those things in coverage, being a little bit of a smaller modern linebacker and getting thrown into the fire. We have not seen an inside linebacker come into the league and be truly successful in Wink Martindale's defense. We have not seen that out of a rookie linebacker. It didn't happen in New York this past season. It didn't happen in Baltimore. On top of that, we haven't really seen an influx in general of especially rookie linebackers coming into the NFL and making a super high impact in year one. It seems like the jump at linebacker, because of the difference in pass game, has been substantial. And the fact that college football, typically a lot of offenses are running spread 2-man concepts. For instance, the Ravens go play the Patriots with Cam Newton at quarterback and in New England in that monsoon game, and the Patriots run every old school run concept variation, every man, gap, trap, counter, bash, everything at Patrick Queen. He had an awful game. He told me that was his worst game as a professional. The old school run concepts that teams can still throw at you don't exist as often in college football. And the 3-man route concepts, it's a lot more RPO rhythm, fully spread stuff in college football for the most part. Generally, not always, but generally. So those things were a struggle, and COVID did impact his ability to learn and grow quickly and get all the reps he needed as a 20, 21-year-old that didn't start a ton. The Ravens threw him into the fire, and like you said, he was up and down, made some impact plays, had some inconsistent games where he was getting washed out or getting a little lost in coverage, and was trying to play a little too fast, missing some tackles, all of those things. Fast forward to this past year, I said, I got to ask him as well, what is the best moment of your career so far? And he said the day he got the news that Mike Macdonald will be defensive coordinator, whether you want to admit or not that he was already playing at a super high level before the Ravens acquired Roquan Smith, that only made it better because it allowed Queen to really take on an attacking style role as someone that could go shoot a gap and open up space for Roquan Smith, who is more experienced, is a better processor than Patrick Queen is. So for him to be able to go take on that role, attacking a little bit more, playing a little bit more in the hook, less man coverage, some of those things did help him. But you just saw the confidence grow and grow. You saw him blow up the Browns on back-to-back plays and get huge tackle for losses on Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, knifing through gaps, making all kinds of plays. Impactful pass rusher, one of the best pass rushing inside linebackers in the NFL last year. The game has slowed down for him. He is mature. He is confident. He has seen it. He has experience. He's playing in a defense, in Mike Macdonald's defense, that allows linebackers to go be a little bit more infantry, to go hit and run and be aggressive, as opposed to this high processing that is required of the, we saw in Wink Martindale's defense, we saw the Ravens tried to trot out Peanut Owasu and Kenny Young, inexperienced linebackers. They had to go get veterans in Josh Bynes and LJ Fort because they couldn't hang that defense like that with their limited experience. So Queen now has the experience and is playing in a more free-flowing system that is more about flowing to the football together as 11 people, understanding where everyone else is. We saw him make plays on the ball. We saw him get interceptions of Joe Burrow and Mitch Trubisky in AFC North games, all of those things. So I think the world of Patrick Queen. I think he's a high-impact player. I think that we saw him really start to be confident, also able to play slower at times, able to work shuffle tech side to side, and then go use his awesome 4.5 speed to go hunt down plays on the sideline. So I think Patrick Queen's in a great place. He wants that bag. He wants that payday. And, it seems like the Ravens calmed him down. They didn't pick up his 5th year. It felt like he was getting a little emotional. He spoke about that, not to let his emotions get the best of him, especially for a new potential employer, whether it's the Ravens or not. But I think the Ravens would love to keep Patrick Queen for around $8 million a year, maybe $10 million a year. Not going to pay him the $20 million if they just paid Roquan Smith. They're not going to allocate, $200 million to inside linebackers. No one in the NFL is going to do that. But with the spread game causing lighter boxes, you need better interior linemen and better linebacker play. You can't have guys in a 6-man box making mistakes or you'll get toasted. So I think linebacker play is more important when things get more spread out in many ways. The DBs have more help. The linebackers don't. So I think the Ravens would love to keep Patrick Queen to a modest, Tyus Bowser type 3-year, $30-40 million deal, something like that. What he probably, I think, could, with another strong season, he'll get more than that. It seems like coaches and scouts, and whenever there's polls on The Athletic or ESPN, guys mention Patrick Queen's name. And I think a lot of Ravens fans, think poorly of him because of some of the tape he had and some of the missed tackles he had as a 21-year-old rookie who didn't get a lot of time in camp and had to learn and grow and make mistakes a lot. But I'm fired up to see what he can do this year. I think he's an awesome pass rusher. I think he's capable of making even more splash plays in coverage. And with him and Roquan Smith, you have such ample speed. I think it's his time to shine. He's awesome insurance in case Roquan Smith does ever, knock on wood, need to miss time, which, hey, it happens. They're smaller guys playing a physical game. And, Queen said he lost some weight. He wants to play even faster. So go play faster, go make plays, go get your hand on the football, force some fumbles, grab some picks, get some sacks, and help this team go compete for a championship. And I think I would say that really one of the main strengths of the Ravens' entire roster is Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith playing in tandem, especially the way they did in the second half last year. So that tandem is something that wins you games, in my opinion. That is high-level impact. That is something that other teams look at your defense and say, oh, snap, those guys cover ground laterally, and they will come blitz and hit and beat backs and require linemen to pick them up, things of that nature. So teams are going to have to game plan for him and Roquan Smith. I'm excited about it. Linebacker play is my favorite. I think it's one of the most impressive athletes. You have to be able to take on blocks of linemen. You have to be able to cover running backs, tight ends. You have to be able to, do it all. kind of like running backs. And the devaluation of running back has led to some conversation about the devaluation of linebacker, but linebacker is a much more cerebral position in my my humble opinion than running back is. So with that, hopefully Patrick Queen has a big year.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was going to mention the Kenny Young, Patrick Owasso thing, where Kenny Young was a rookie, right? He was a rookie that year, and they essentially put him next to Patrick Owasso, who was coming off of playing next to CJ Mosley, and they gave Owasso the green dot, and they said, to these young guys, go out there and do everything at NFL speed in much more important roles, and for Kenny Young, an NFL role, and it just did not work. And I think the way that Patrick Queen has now come along next to a Roquan Smith, it's incredible what those two did together last year, and I'm really excited for that. But Spencer, let's finally talk about some sneaky roster fits. This team has a lot that they have going for them, especially in the depth department. I feel a lot better this year about their depth, and especially at a couple different positions, wide receiver being one, than I did last year. But do you have anybody like a bubble guy who you're not necessarily sure if he's going to make it or not, or might be on the outside looking in right now, who you think is actually a pretty sneaky good fit for the roster? I mean, for me, maybe a guy like a Ben Mason. I know Patrick Ricard is the fullback, but all accounts coming out of workouts, OTAs, minicamp, Ben Mason was catching passes, and is he a better fit for Todd Monken's system? I don't know. I don't know what Patrick Ricard's role is going to be, but who are some guys on their roster right now that might not be on the final one right now for you that could be sneaky fits for him coming up in a couple weeks?
Pardon me, I think I'm gonna have to sneeze here. Whew, got one tickling in my nose. Hopefully it passes. The first guy I'm looking at is an interesting one. The Ravens actually hosted him on a visit. I think he actually only ended up running right around a 4.6. He's about 5'11", or excuse me, 5'10", has 31-inch arms. So he's got decently long arms for that size. But I'm looking at Corey Mayfield Jr. out of the University of Texas San Antonio. He's a road runner. The Ravens hosted him on a top 30 visit, and he ended up going undrafted. I think that he is a competitive cornerback that has length at a smaller stature. I don't think he's too small or looks too small or feels too small to play on the outside. The Ravens did bring in Rock Ya-Sin. They do have some guys fighting beyond Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, and a few other guys that are looking to be able to go get some snaps. But I think Corey Mayfield could definitely have a strong camp and a strong preseason and find his way onto this football team. Someone that just rarely was out of place. He's not the most spectacular athlete. Like I said, he ran a 4.6, but he was all conference in the CUSA. I think he was the all Texas, as in like Texas A&M, Texas, every Texas Tech, second team cornerback, and started a ton. He can go tackle. He can go break up passes. He is aggressive. He's confident playing the football. He had 3 straight games with an interception, and teams stopped throwing at him. And he was a super senior this last year. He was honorable mention CUSA the last 2 years prior, had a ton of solo tackles. He can come up and hit, and he is just a competitive dude. Reminds you of Tavon Young a little bit. He's not quite as smaller in stature, but Tavon Young played on the outside as a rookie and a little bit throughout his career and looked the part there. Had a really nice game against Antonio Brown when he was wearing 36, I think, as a rookie, some weird number like that. If you go back and watch that, that was some great tape. Tavon Young. It was the year the Ravens absolutely stunk, and Tavon Young still fought Antonio Brown to the death and had a really nice game against him. So he's one that I'm looking at. Keaton Mitchell, the undrafted running back out of East Carolina, is a firecracker. And running backs in Baltimore have had some super volatile health. Even Justice Hill, who didn't end up missing a ton of time last year, did tear an Achilles. And for Keaton Mitchell, he might be a little bit too small, maybe make plays on special teams, but he's going to have to. If he can find the ability to go be a gunner and find the ability to earn a spot in that sense, I think that he's someone who could make an impact with his speed and his long speed and his explosiveness, getting a few touches, getting a 30, 40, 50 touch year in Baltimore. In terms of other guys, it's a little bit of slim pickings. I think that Jeremiah Moon's another guy they've had hang around who definitely could go have a shot there. Trayvon Mullen, I think, is a bubble player that's bounced around, former high draft pick, cornerback out of Clemson. I think this is his 5th year now. He's certainly bounced around. Lamar Jackson's cousin, but someone that does show the right type of press ability and comfortable playing man coverage throughout his college and NFL career at times to fit into a Baltimore Ravens cornerback mold. another guy that's going to have to go play special teams that probably didn't have to play as much as many other younger players did, but is certainly going to have to go fight and look for a spot. Josh Ross was my darling of camp last year and ended up making team, then suffering a season-ending injury. But I loved what I saw. He looked like a Mike linebacker, processed so well, took on blocks so well, was so confident, sifting through the dancing elephant parade of offensive linemen all preseason, and is a sturdy tackler. He's been in Mike Macdonald's system. This will be his third year in Mike Macdonald's system. So I think that he was a superstar in preseason last year and is someone that could eventually take over. People are going to look to Trenton Simpson as that linebacker to replace Patrick Queen. But I'll tell you what, do not count Josh Ross out to be the guy that ends up starting if Patrick Queen moves on next season. So keep an eye on Josh Ross in that sense. I'm sure people were familiar with him last year. I mean, I wrote tons of articles about him, tons of clips. He was an absolute stud there. Looking around the rest of the roster, I mean, Laquan Treadwell has bounced around, been a little bit productive at times. If he can go play special teams, I think he could definitely beat out a Tylan Wallace or a James Prochet for a roster spot. Other than that, there's not a ton, but looking for those guys to go make plays. You mentioned Ben Mason. Sure, they could move in that direction. Ricard has had some hit injuries that have caused some unfortunate circumstances for him the last 2 years. Has missed a ton of time this offseason. Hopefully he gets healthy, but I'm sure a ton of people will be looking to Dante Demas Jr. And then we'll see if a Shamar Bridges or another, maybe an Angelo Blackson who's bounced around. He's a 30-year-old that's gotten some starts, gotten a good bit of snaps. The NFL can make some noise for them. I think they would love to have him on the 53 potentially. So those are the guys that stand out to me.
Man, I cannot believe you forgot about your savior, Andy Isabella.
I mean, in a Todd Monken offense, honestly, maybe. Todd Monken's the kind of guy who's going to say, what do? You run real fast? All right, we'll make you run real fast. You'll take off. We'll treat you like a track and field athlete, what Andy Isabella is. So don't think in a Greg Roman offense you're going to be able to get much out of Andy Isabella. Maybe. Todd Monken's had a few receivers that have looked a lot like Andy Isabella in the last couple of years and has put the football in their hands. So maybe this is his time, and the Ravens clearly like something about him. They've hung on to him here and stashed him away here for a little bit.
Yeah, so clearly you're saying bet the over on Andy Isabella touchdowns. It's probably 0 right now, so it's a pretty fine bet if you want to have him score.
If you can find that on any sports book, I think you should leave that sports book.
You wanted that one like random touchdown last year. We never got it. So it's only
he did
right.
Get a couple touches towards the red zone, but never that touchdown.
Yeah, so all right, we're gonna call it. This is the year, and Andy Isabella is gonna be the new Locked On Ravens legend if Justin Houston does not come back. But Justin Houston's always gonna have a place in the Locked On Ravens history books. But Spencer, I appreciate you for hopping on with me. Thank you so much. Please tell people where they can find you, what you're working on here, as we're coming up close to training camp.
Definitely. You can always find me on Twitter at Ravens for Dummies. That's the number 4. You can find the Exit 52 podcast. We were formerly the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. We joined forces with Brian Banks and Eric Arditi and Taylor Smythe. Jake Luke and myself are always chopping up Orioles, chopping up Ravens here. We've taken a little bit of a hiatus from the Ravens this offseason, but got some awesome plans coming for us. So check out the Exit 52 podcast. You can also check out the exit52podcast.com, writing some blogs on there, getting in some Orioles talk too. So if you're an Orioles fan, have that crossover, definitely come check it out. We're talking Orioles, talking Ravens all the time, and looking forward to a nice post-All-Star break run from the Birds in Orange, and hopefully a hot September from the Birds in Purple.
A big shout out to Spencer for hopping on, talking Ravens. As always, be sure to follow him, follow his work. He does great stuff for the Ravens, covering the Ravens, and also the Orioles as well. Baltimore's a sports city. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens talk as always, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.